Hey, everybody, welcome to EIS Live, now on YouTube as well as Facebook. We are excited today. I actually have two special guests because I have Frances Pappalardo with us today. Frances and Tony, her husband, have a company called Customize Your Life, which is an internship company that helps people do just that. Very much the same as EIS plays a role in that we help people to discover their true selves. So I'm going to ask Frances to pop on as if you have something to do it. I have to let you in. So I'm going to pop you in. Okay. And here she comes.
There I am. Good to be here with you, Bill. This is an exciting day for me too, because man, you've been wise counsel in my life for, is it close to a decade now? Maybe we're getting up there in years. And then Danica has been become a very close friend, like a sister to me over the last couple of years. So to see the merging of these two worlds come together is very exciting. Thank you for asking me to co-host. Real happy to be here.
Yeah. Well, it's great to have you here. And yeah, so we're super excited for this and excited for what we're going to be talking about too. So right before we get started, I want to remind everybody to post your questions, as I have a banner crawling along the bottom there, and we'll be trying to get to some of those if we have some time at the end of the broadcast. Questions for Danica. So I do want to introduce Danica in just a moment. I'm really, really excited about this. One of the reasons is that I just like Danica because when you sit with Danica and you chat, it's like you know who you have when you have her in front of you, and I really appreciate that about her. She's direct. She's decisive. She's pretty intense, as it were, but she's also very vulnerable. And that's quite a nice combination to have as your personality. And, in her podcast, that's called Pretty Intense. This is some of the ways that she describes the podcast. And this is a quote from a little blurb from that. So it says, sometimes people haven't necessarily been asked a certain question, or maybe someone hasn't thought a certain way or to even challenge themselves. And I feel like for me, I got that therapy through interviews. So this podcast is going to be intense therapy. We're going to go as deep as we can possibly go with people and learn just what they did and how you can too. Join me for this deep dive. My only warning is it could get pretty intense. So I think that's what we're going to do with Danica today. So I just want to welcome Danica and on Danica.
Yes. Very intense over here. I mean, intense painting, intense. I actually have lipstick on. I mean, things are very intense. So good to be here, Bill. Thank you. I very much respect your work. I've obviously had I've had my own experience with you and the work that you do, and it's so profound. Frances, not to take away anything, Bill, but I get such benefit out of having like sisters to rely on to talk things through, because I really believe in the processing of information out loud, not only to be asked questions and come to realizations, but also to say words out loud. There's so much power in saying things out loud. There's so much processing that ends up happening. So I guess I could consider you both a couple of a good pool of wonderful therapists for me.
Aw. Go ahead, Frances.
Yeah, well, man, I feel the same way about you too. And I was just telling Bill before you hopped on, this is really special for me because, as you know, he's been wise counsel in our life for a while now. And really the whole reason why we're together, for those of you that are watching that don't know our story, the whole reason why my husband and I are still together to this day is because when we were going through our lowest of lows, we were introduced to Bill Hoffman, and he took us on a journey of self-awareness, discovering our temperaments, discovering our emotional wounds, healing those things, coming through to really become our authentic selves and really learn how to love ourselves so that in turn we could love one another. And Danica, you met me on the other side of that journey, although it's still progressing. But you and I are both deep divers. We do not swim in the shallow waters. So I remember the very first day meeting you on the couch in Austria, and we just dove into the deep end real quick, and we've stayed there, and I love it. And thank you for being my soul sister as well. And I'm really excited. I told Bill, let's go deep. Let's take it today. So
I'm always down for that.
excited to hear what comes out of it. So go ahead, Bill.
Yeah. Well, what a great combination to have you both here. You know, that's just super awesome. So, well, you know, I wanted to give you a couple of lead-in questions, trying to get the ball rolling. And a lot of people, of course, know you as, you know, a highly successful NASCAR driver. And I know you're driving the pace car it's next week, right?
Well, I guess it's this weekend. So yeah, at the Indy 500. So I originally started out as an IndyCar driver, but then did NASCAR. So, so it's kind of like home turf heading back to Indiana, back to the Indianapolis 500. So that's this weekend, Memorial Day, Sunday. Well, it's
Awesome.
actually Sunday is the race, but Memorial Day is Monday. But it's always Memorial Day weekend.
Mm-hmm. So I guess besides your podcast and other ventures, that's probably what most people might know you from. And my timelines might be a little bit off here, but I know that since you've retired from racing, you've had some other ventures and, you know, entrepreneurial ventures and companies that you've started, as well as the pretty intense podcast. You got the Somnium Wine Company and maybe some other things as well that I don't know about. But I want to talk about this aspect of things because it's quite a lofty identity to really be the only successful woman, I guess, in a male-dominated sport. And even just having achieved, you know, so much in your life and having the notoriety that goes along with that, what's it been like transitioning, you know, from retiring from that spotlight into this next phase of your life and discovering, let's just say, the real Danica in that journey?
Mm-hmm.
And we have plenty of time, so go for it.
Good. I can get a little long-winded. The podcast has taught me to shut up, but it just means that when I get interviewed, I just like relish the idea of being able to blabber on. And that's the point. Because I talked way too much when I first started interviewing people. But what was your question again before I rambled?
The question basically is, in that transition, you know, coming out of the spotlight and then kind of, I would imagine, you know, having to find maybe a different you, the real you underneath all of that. What was that?
I think, you know, I will say that I don't think that I've ever like oriented my entire existence on one thing. And, you know, to jump ultra in the deep end, I've actually struggled far more in my personal relationships than I have in business. In my, with things that are considered work, I have a much more healthy orientation of disconnection from outcomes and sort of maybe the codependent side of things. I really just do the things that I want to do. I allow flow. If something comes, if something goes, it's okay with me. It's not where I have really found as much resistance. And it's probably because I have not grasped so much when it comes to the area of professionalism versus personal relationships. So I guess that's a start off way of saying it hasn't been that bad. Like I decided to retire. It was, you know, there was a transition of allowing myself to let go of it versus feeling like I was quitting and kind of figuring that out. But I don't, for me, it hasn't been all that hard. When people ask me if I miss racing, the answer is no, I don't. I'm very grateful that is how I feel. And that I wasn't forced out suddenly or been forced out based on something physical, like an injury or something like that. So I think I really came to a good place with it. But I do think that there have been little moments and waves of feeling like, okay, what's my purpose again? Like, what am I doing? And I feel like someone who I want to do great things, big things, and help. And so I guess that's been the only thing that I've had little waves of. and I can get comfy and cozy in those moments of feeling like I'm having fun and doing some of the things that I've never had an opportunity to do. But then I all of a sudden get really ramped up and motivated, and I start sending messages and making phone calls. I'm like, what are we doing? And what are we doing that? And let's do this and let's organize that. And I like being busy. So I suppose I'm also entering another good little spot in time where I'm starting to get more busy. The Indy 500 is next weekend or this weekend. So I'm broadcasting and driving the pace car. And then I'm doing a couple other races, and I'm working a little bit more, and the world is coming back online again. So but I think that also having really good friends and really good family and people to be able to bounce things off of is of the utmost importance. And so, but fundamentally, it's about, I think what's helped is that I have never allowed my entire existence to revolve around just one thing, especially in business.
Mm-hmm.
That's really powerful, because a lot of people do let their life revolve around one thing, and maybe not consciously, but subconsciously, because of the way the world trains us to think that we are what we do. So to hear from someone who, I mean, you were Time Magazine's top 100 women, #1 in a male dominated sport. To hear someone like you say, yeah, but that's not all of who I am, and it never was, I think is really, it's a simplistic idea, and probably something that most people aren't aware of, that they view themselves as what they do. But I think if like that light bulb going off for a lot of people could make a big difference, that you are not just one thing. And if you allow your life to revolve around that one thing consistently, you'll get disappointed and you'll probably never measure up, because it's all based upon performance, right? Of who you are in terms of what you do. So I think that's really powerful.
Well, I can speak to it from the other side of my existence of relationships and the downfalls of that, because let's face it, I mean, really they kind of manifest in similar ways. If you are going to, put all your effort into one thing and let that be your entire existence, and orienting everything from travel to living to emotions, all of those things around that one thing. Like, I can speak to that on the other side of my life personally. So for that, I mean, the heavy lesson learned for myself has been I was always someone wanting to be chosen, wanting, someone to wanting to be enough for someone. And what I ended up realizing is I was supposed to be choosing myself, and I am enough for myself. And so, that can be also seen on the other side of things in business, where if I were someone who allowed something to rule my life, then it has a higher likelihood of ending in tragedy, but really just not being happy. What I realized was how much I was abandoning myself to keep things going. And so I think that if I looked at that into business, it's like, if I abandon myself and who I am and how I operate and the goals that I have, or my integrity or whatever, even if it's where I live, things like that. If you start to abandon yourself to do all those things, then, there's downside to that. Nothing's free. Like, there's always going to be some kind of a payoff. There's going to be a payoff and a balance. So I think overall the message that's the most important that I've learned is to really, it's not selfish to make yourself happy. And I think that the caveat is to not make yourself happy at the expense of someone else. It's not about that. It's not about being disrespectful or rude or not holding up what you say you're going to do because you don't feel like it, because that's going to make you happy that day. It's not about that. It's like, how can you make yourself happy without, making sure there's no repercussions around it? And that's not the hardest thing in the world to do. You can do that. You can make yourself happy and be who you are and stay in integrity without hurting anybody. And then when you show somebody how you treat yourself and how you like your world to go and how you act around people and treat yourself, that's how you teach them to treat you. So in the relationship side of things, I abandoned myself So I got abandoned, right? Like, I mean, it's like I was showing people how to treat me because of the way I treated myself. And so since in business, now I know we're flip-flopping and like we were talking about, but it's just flip-flopped in my world. So, but in business, I don't abandon myself. I know what I'm freaking worth. I know what I'm prepared to do. I know what I'm not prepared to do. I know that I'm only going to do things that keep me happy and enjoy and fulfilling. And because of that, business has always flowed really effortlessly for me. And I don't create a lot of resistance in business. So, that was a big fundamental lesson to learn for me in this past year.
And I can't help but think, with our audience, the EIS people that, are partaking in EIS or in the camp somewhere or another, they're very familiar with temperament. Is it okay if I share your temperament? Is that all right with you?
Share my chart. I don't care. You can go for it.
Well, we won't go into the chart or anything, but we'll definitely go for the temperament. Okay. So I know there's going to be a lot of people. I'm seeing some of the comments, and I know some of the people, and I know their temperaments that are popping up. And the thing, I'm listening to strengths and weaknesses, in the presentation that you just gave us, And so Danica is a melancholy compulsive and inclusion. And I know you studied your temperament. We went over it, of course. And you're a choleric in control and a phlegmatic sanguine in affection. And I keep hearing this choleric part of you, but mostly in strength. Like this knowing who you are, knowing what you want to do, not being taken over, like really basically taking charge of your own life without, I think the most important thing you said about that too, is like not at the expense of other people. And that can be a choleric downfall, like kind of being a bulldozer in life and just bulldozing your way through, but having that same sensitivity with that little bit of phlegmatic and sanguine mix in there, because you're a real people person as well. And not just
as you know, my deep personal relationships. I mean, I really love to be light and joyful and happy and positive and sunshine. I mean, that's for sure how I am in my deep relationships and deep, meaningful conversation and insight and growth. However, as we, the more basic words are, to be an introvert or an extrovert, and I source energy I always source from being alone, but I sometimes source from being with someone, but only when it's a deep, meaningful connection. Like how Francis and I are. That's a fulfilling, filling time for me. But if I have to go step and repeat, take photos, shake hands, sign autographs, be at a cocktail hour with random people that I don't know and have to make surface level conversation for an extended period of time, that's draining. So, by nature, I'm an introvert, even though in certain situations I do get energy from people. It just has to be the specific kind of person.
100% melancholy, compulsive, and inclusion. Don't want the surface conversations. Got to be hanging around, taking pictures, doing all the stuff. For sure. Yeah, that's great. And you're a good negotiator too.
Yeah, I've been told. I mean, this has to do with a little bit too of even astrology in my chart and having the Virgo nature to my, for my son. I'm an Aries by nature, but it's in the 6th house. I won't bore people with that, but with my chart and the way that I am, I'm very earth grounded and I have a lot of that. And so, and also, I think that there's probably from the choleric and control, I also am very definitive. So I've recently been hearing about techniques to learn if people actually believe what they're saying or not. It's like if they land up, that's a question. They don't believe it. But if they land down, they believe it. And so it's an actual truth for them. So, I've been described as, I've been recently, I just found out about this. I land my words. I end like this. I'm sure of what I say. But I will say there's the one little story from when I was young. And this is back when I think I was probably, maybe I was 15-ish. I was, this began my transition from go-karting into cars. And this group that took me on as a management group brought me in, and I was talking to the guy that had the money and was helping me out. And I was not super concise and definitive and confident with my words. And I remember him telling me, I remember I was sitting in his office, and he said that when you speak really definitively. You don't think things, you know things. And ever since then, when I was just a wee old teenager, I started to change my language to when I would speak, I would make statements. I wouldn't ask questions like, am I doing okay? Like, I'm doing great, you know? And so you just changing the language. And at the end of the day, language breaks down to the old ancient word of abracadabra. Like, words are spells. And so it's really powerful, the things that you tell yourself. Out loud is, of course, very powerful. But let's not forget about the internal ones too. And I think that's a whole world that, you know, if we had to be friends with our inner monologue and the stuff that our insecurities or ego or whatever you want to call it says to us, we would not be. That's the book Untethered Soul. I think it said that. Like, if you had to be friends with your inner monologue, you would not be. But it's there. So the better we can clean that up too, on top of the words that actually come out of our mouth, are really creating our reality, essentially.
As a man believes in his heart, so he is.
Exactly. Belief. Oh my gosh. Isn't that the most, I feel like people ask me all the time about how to accomplish something. And I always tell them that the dream is really the very first most important step, is to have a dream and actually know what you want. Because without knowing if you don't know where you want to go, how are you going to get there? And there isn't even a place, because you have nothing. You're mindlessly wandering and hoping for the best, and instead of thinking that life is happening to you instead of for you. Then, so you have to have something that you truly want. But then once you want it, to me, actually the actual like alchemy or power or ability for something to manifest in your reality is believing that that thing that you want is possible, and you believe it can happen for you and will happen. And then there's the little final step is releasing the timeline in which that happens, because that's like human nature is so grasping at that sort of timeline of, I'm going to do this, and then in a month, and then in 6 months, and then in 1 year. And then, you know, the timeline is something that is like that third and final step that you have to kind of let go of. But belief is absolutely the magic sauce to making something a reality.
How much of that played into your when you were growing up? Like when you said you started it with go-karts and then transitioned into cars, was that a part of like a dream that you had or something in your growing up experience to become who you have become?
Absolutely. I didn't know the right words, or I guess they weren't wrong. It's not like I guess these words were wrong words, but I didn't actually realize just how I was manifesting, and I didn't realize how powerful this was in the manifesting and the ability to let things come through. But when I was a kid, I remember, especially when I came back from England. So after I raced go-karts for 7 years. Then when I was 16, I moved to England and started racing cars. I came back in the middle of a season, came away from that ride, and then didn't have one the rest of the year. And then the next year didn't have one either until the very end of the year. So I really spent almost 2 years of a very pivotal 19, 20-year-old period in my life where I should be racing like crazy. If that's going to be my job, I shouldn't be sitting on the sidelines doing nothing. And I called it blind faith, like even when I was a kid. And I also described having this. So the blind faith was that I believed that I was going to make it. I believed that I had so much to offer. I believed that I could do it. I believed if someone could give me a chance, I would show them. And I just knew it. And I just knew that if someone gave me a chance, I could show them. And it would be a big deal. All I knew is I was like, this could be a big deal. And I didn't know what that would look like, but that's what I believed. And so I called it blind faith. And then I also, anchoring me was that first step one. The belief is step two, but the anchoring being step one was what it was that I actually wanted to do, which was I wanted to win the Indy 500 and I wanted to be a professional race car driver. And so that was my beacon. I described it then as my beacon. It was like a light out there in the distance, and I was heading towards it. And I think that we can get hung up at times on how we get somewhere, and instead of it's good to have small goals in relation to the big one, but not to make small goals your end point. Like that's not. I don't think that is as smooth of a path. Because when you have a beacon that's further out there, you don't really get caught up on the little sort of meandering that you go on your way there. You're headed in the right direction. And how am I supposed to know what the best lessons are going to be so that I can get there? And so the universe gives you those. But if you get fixated on like somewhere between here and there, thinking this is what I want to do, well, then that becomes not only your finish line, but it also becomes the only place you can get to and the only place that you can go. And that's, I think, blocking flow. So I think it's the most important to have a really aspirational, super, super lofty goal. And then, small incremental goals along the way can be okay. They don't have to be super specific. But that kind of just kind of helps keep you. The little mini goals help keep you positive, because obviously the lofty one, I mean, even if you don't get there, I'm going to guarantee if you set a good enough one, you've had an insane career, because that's my story. I mean, I didn't get what I wanted, but I still had a pretty decent career. So the little things keep you positive along the way, which is very critical. Your attitude is very important. But then it still keeps you going towards that beacon.
Mm. Yeah, that's really good. And if I could add a story that you told me actually about your ultimate destination in life. You told me a story where your dad said to you, Danica, wherever you look, that's where you're going to go. Wherever your eyes are, that's where you'll go, in reference to going around the track. And it's so true in life as well, because whatever you're allowing to come into your mind, into your brain, to feed and nourish your thoughts is where you're going to end up traveling as well. So that's so good. I want to ask you a question in reference to, so there was a morning that I spent at your house that was like kind of a crazy morning for both of us, right? So I spent the night and I was up all night studying for this ridiculous test. And at this desk. Yeah, at that desk, right?
Yeah.
Waffles, and they were delicious. Thank you for that. It was amazing. But so I stayed the night. I was like all in my head, like, just in my space, ready to take this test. And you texted me about the vineyard and the fires. I texted you from your room. I was like, hey, I don't even remember why I'm texting you while you're in your own house. I think to tell you, I don't know, maybe I forget, but I texted.
You were probably up like very early and weren't sure that I was awake.
I think that's what it was. And there was something about maybe using, you had a meeting. So I was trying to tell you, like, you could use your desk space or whatever. And, you didn't have to wait for me. And you responded back, there is no interview, there is no meeting, whatever it is. The vineyard has been burning down. And I remember just like that moment, just my heart sinking. I said, I'll meet you in the kitchen. We met in the kitchen. And it's a pretty wild story, right? Because as we got further on in the day, the vineyard didn't fully burn down. And there was this crazy line, right? It just stopped when it got to yours, right? Like this crazy like wall of
it went all the way around the blocks. It was like on the edges of it, but it didn't actually get into the actual vineyard blocks much. It went all around it.
It was, and I mean, to me and visually, it was just an insane, like, all right, what does this mean? Because there was just this huge wall of protection around your vineyard. And I don't know, I just wanted to know if you've had any further thoughts about it, because we haven't spoken about that. But if you wanted to speak into that, and a little bit about just how you respond in those moments, because most people, right, these things are colossal events in our life. I failed the test that morning, so whatever, it's not like a vineyard burning down, but but I remember coming out and being like, yep, I failed. And you were like, cool. And we just sat on the couch together and we were both just like, just processing,
Yeah.
So yeah, when you go through those times of crisis in life, how do you respond so it doesn't just overtake you as well?
Well, I think that the lesson, and that's an interesting, as I'm piecing some thoughts together, I'm glad you asked that, because so what I ended up learning after, mind you, for sure the photos were very interesting how it went around it. It was like,
Mhm.
God was on my side for sure. Like I was like, I thought
Yes.
to myself, I've been doing something right. Like karma's finally helping me out because everything else seems to be crumbling, but that's a godsend. And so I remember feeling like that, thinking that. And then but let's if I can kind of pull maybe something out of it that's a good lesson in life is that so it wasn't maybe quite as magical, although let's not overlook the magic, but let's look at the actual one of the things that really helped it, which can be taken and put into real life, which is how you prepare yourself for tragedy, for trauma, for these moments. What is the integrity of your being, your body, your mind, your soul, so that you can arrive at these moments that could break you? And so what happened was, before the fires came through, since there's always fire season in Napa, and it's been getting worse, and part of it, there's multiple reasons, but so before the fire season came, my general manager said, hey, farming crew, I want you guys to get out here and I want you to clean in between the rows to make sure that we don't have more things to catch fire in the vineyard. And so all the rows got cleaned out, all the like dried, dead stuff, everything got cleaned out. So the vineyard was prepared. So this would be like, knowing your temperament, knowing someone else's temperament. This would be like having your own North Star. This would be stepping into the lessons to learn it so you don't have to go through it again. And so the only reason why the fire really came hard into the vineyard at all was because the vineyard next door, in which my general manager told the next door neighbors, clean up your vineyard because fire season's here, and they didn't. And so it caught into my property so much easier. Now, would it have hit the vineyard? Yeah, maybe, but definitely not as bad. And so I think it's such a great way to look at a lesson of preparing your mind, body, and soul at all times, so that when tragedy and trauma hit, that you are prepared to defend it, because my vineyard was prepared to defend itself.
Yes, that is so good. I was like, we haven't spoken about this since, but I just know that you find deeper meaning in things, and that lesson coming out right now. What a great analogy for life, for relationships, for marriages to work, just for your own personal self, going through life, going through the fire and the chaos. If you're not rooted, if you're not planted, if you don't clean out the debris, like when we were doing our work with Bill, and as we still continue to do the work, clearing out the emotional wounds, clearing out the harsh layers of conditioning, so that when fires do come, because hey, life happens to everyone, right? It doesn't discriminate. Everyone has challenges, but you're more prepared. That was so good.
Yeah.
So
Thanks for asking that. I hadn't really thought about that or put that together, but as soon as you asked it, I went, you were like, have you thought about it? I'm like, oh, actually, this is a great analogy. And so, thank you. I mean, these nuggets are all over the place in life. And if we are aware, and if we can clean up enough where we don't meet these sorts of things with being triggered or projecting our own insecurities, then, we are so much more readily available to receive the message.
Yes. You got to post the pictures of this now, because people aren't going to believe me. This is it is a hard line, you guys.
Yeah.
It's like a straight line. I just remember seeing it in my spirit being like that. What a wall of protection. It's so cool. So you have to post those later.
Yeah, I will. Thank you.
That's kind of a perfect way to segue into the next question, Danica. And because you're already talking about it, over the past year, particularly, there's been that incident right there and some other challenges in your life. And I think you just already answered some of those questions, but what are some other, as far as the work that you've been doing on yourself, just dealing with your own heart, understanding yourself, preparing yourself, like you just said, for things that might be coming up. How has this past year been for you? And can you explain some of the breakthroughs that you might have experienced along the way?
Yeah, it was about exactly a year ago. It was, I had just tremendous heartbreak, and the world, the rug being pulled out from underneath me, and everything changing from where I lived, who I was with, what I was doing, what my future was. There was so many things, plans, so many things that all of a sudden just shifted. And so, I think if somebody has asked me recently, what are you most proud of? And that's a pretty broad question, but I am most proud because, to me, this goes across all domains of life. I am most proud of my accountability. And I think that it has served me. I think I've always been very accountable when it comes to my work life, which is why I've always, whenever I was racing, I would tell them, tell me what I need to do. I said, it's easier for me to fix myself than it is to try and find some needle in a haystack problem. Just tell me what I need to do. And so I've always been very accountable when it comes to business and in my professional life. But in my personal life, I have not been as accountable. And I say that, and I want to make sure that it still is understood that it doesn't mean that someone was right or wasn't wrong. It doesn't mean that. It just means, what's your part in it? Why did you allow it? Or why did you show up for it? Or what did you do that kept you in that cycle? And so, and what did you do that was wrong too? And I think that accountability has been probably the most important thing that I have, the thing that I am most proud of myself for. So for me, it was really taking accountability for myself and the kind of relationships that I was bringing in, that I was attracting, and that I was staying in. And I really had to look at childhood patterning from my mom and my dad to see why I kept finding myself in relationships with people that were emotionally unavailable, people that were hard on me, and people that didn't choose me. Why did I keep showing up for that? And so that dynamic could be found in my dad, but then the mom dynamic was the one that was way, way, way further underneath. And that was how I abandoned myself. And so realizing how, and I love my parents, and I'm going to guarantee that they got these patterns from their parents, and their parents probably got it from their parents. And this is why generational trauma just keeps going, because it's hard to get out of the pattern. It's not necessarily this was not a choice of my parents, and it wasn't probably a choice of my parents' parents, and so on. And that's why they say that when you can heal an ancestral generational pattern, you can heal seven generations both direction. Yep. And so I can see the forward, but what I've been able to see since I've healed it, and let me finish the mom part before I go into it, was that, my mom, I remember asking her last summer if she was able to have emotions and talk about emotions when she was a kid. And she's like, well, no, we didn't talk about that. And I'm like, oh, okay. And so anyway, fast forward to much later on, there was something emotional that happened, and I hadn't heard from my mom for a while. And I was like, a while meaning like a day, but I'd heard from a lot of other people. And then it was like, and I was like, oh my gosh, my mom wasn't there for me. Like I had to be there for myself emotionally. And so like essentially she abandoned me emotionally. And what I would do in my relationships then was abandon myself. It was the same wound. I was doing the same thing to myself that she was doing to me. And again, I love my mother, but this was the problem. This was the pattern. And so I had to learn how to stop abandoning myself to make someone else happy. And so I learned a lot of really, really big lessons in the last year. But it's, what I really, and I guess I'm kind of rambling on, but what I've really learned in that accountability, in seeing it in all the areas of my life, is that everybody is information about myself. And every reaction I have is information about myself. This is not really about them. Because when something happens that someone does, when you're in a really good place and healed, you see them for their wound. You don't see them for their reaction or their quick, whatever it is that they do that puts you off. You see like, oh, where did that come from? Oh, you like meet it with an open, whole healed heart. You don't see something triggering. And so I think that anytime there is a spike in either a reaction that you have or something that someone else does, all of a sudden, if someone has a big reaction, you can look at it now and go, oh, they're triggered. It wasn't something I did. And trust me when I say that when you've been a dick, right? Like, when you've done wrong, when you've been rude, when you've been snide, right? Like, when you've been a little quick and short, like, So when you can't put your finger on it and you're like, I don't know what I did. I'm going to tell you, you didn't do anything, but you triggered somebody and that has nothing to do with you.
Francis, before you run with this, Francis, and I know you're going to run with it, I just want to ask you, Danica, a little bit. Who is the circle of accountability for you? Who are some of those? They're not to name names, of course, but what kind of people are they?
I know
you and I had a couple of discussions about that stuff, but yeah.
Well, I mean, this is an interesting aspect because, the first thing that came to mind is no one can make me know that. No one can make me see that. Yeah. But people are information. So when I finally started stepping into my own, because basically what happened was I was blaming everyone and everything except for myself. And it only took seriously a couple of days for me to go, it can't be everyone else's fault. What is my part in it? And so within days, I got to this place. Now, I had to go through all the learning of like what that totally was at the deepest layers. But I had to do that for myself. This is why you can't make someone want to heal. You can't make someone. They have to like be ready to take that first step into it. So I would say that like the healing really came because I was ready to step into accountability because I was sick of the pattern. And the patterns are there for a reason. Like it's very hard to learn a lesson with one glitch. But, we're not all glitching in every area. So I'm going to guess that everybody's got a few things that they need to heal, right? The main things. And so, they show up in patterns. So, but the kind of people that I have around me, actually, I'm not sure I'm answering your question exactly how you want, but I think this is important. The people that I have around me show me who I am because of who they are. So they are information about me. So I have people around me, which owning my worth has been challenging. So like these words are already starting to get a little challenging, but the people around me are honest, honorable, follow through. They have deep love. They have patience, kindness, sacrifice. That's the kind of people that I have around me. And so what I can know about that, because I can see that in them, is that's me. So if you have good people in your life that are willing to be honest with you, be there for you, listen to you, like really be there for you, then that's showing you information about yourself. And so, I think that to step into my more true worth, I had to really like see that was the kind of people that I was attracting, and also what I could see in them. Because again, we don't see things as they are, we see things as we are. And so if you're seeing someone as being, maybe they're probing too much, maybe they're not, maybe, I don't know, they're angry, maybe they're gossipy, maybe they're rude, whatever it is, you're seeing aspects of yourself. And so I guess it's kind of it's a bit complicated, but I stepped into this sort of aspect of my reality, of my patterns, therefore my reality, because I didn't have anywhere to go anymore. I was running out of blame options. And then I was able to allow that support. And I really fell for the first time into my friends, where I allowed them to hold me up, keep me propped up, which is something I couldn't do for myself. And so, allowing someone to take care of you, I think, is also kind of hard. And maybe people are listening, it will register, but for me, it's been hard, and a hard process to believe that I could be worth something without being the strong one.
Wow, that is so good.
Yeah, powerful. And I've been learning that lesson too. You and I are very similar in our temperaments and our nature. And for me, this past year with Tony's journey battling cancer, I watched you do it at the beginning of the year, and now I'm having to learn how to lean into it more and more and let friends support me. And it's been quite the journey. But you and I have talked about the term Anam Cara, which means soul friend in Gaelic. And it's about having people in your life, or at least a person or people in your life, that can really hold up a mirror and allow you to see those things for yourself through honesty and transparency and vulnerability, in a safe space, in a safe environment, in a way that is enveloped in love as well. And you've certainly been that for me, and I thank you for that. Something I wanted to tie two pieces of what we talked about together, because I think it poses a challenging chasm for some people mentally, and that's manifesting and believing what you want and speaking in the direction of the ways in which you want to go, and being mindful of your words, that you're not speaking death, you're speaking life, you're not speaking negative, you're speaking positive. At the same time, what we just talked about, which is processing and talking about our feelings and the raw emotions. And sometimes people can live so much over here that it's a toxic positivity, in a sense, where they're not allowing themselves then to really feel the feelings. They're not allowing themselves to go there to actually really heal, because they're afraid of it. So they'd rather live on the surface and not do the work. And that might fit into the manifesting. I'm only speaking life and positivity. And then there's some people that live too much over here, and then they allow themselves to fall into victimhood of their circumstance, and they never process through it. So let's talk about that chasm and interesting crossroads, and what your thoughts are around that.
Yeah, it is tricky, because I think that, there are some really talented and wonderful, call them teachers, call them gurus, call them coaches, whatever you want to call them, out there, who are teaching, preaching, and sort of getting you to a place that you skip the step of looking at the patterning that's holding you back and hopping right over it into positivity, manifesting. Think about the thoughts become things. Just think about the positive. I mean, yes, that's really powerful. And I think that you can get very far, but I don't think that you will have true peace. And you also might also be hindering a little of your pure potential by avoiding the step of looking at the pattern and looking at the things that have held you back. So I guess I've been doing them in congruence. I think you can absolutely still stay really positive and optimistic on the things that you want, while getting into the depths, because you're not really getting into the nuances about that thing that you want and speaking negatively about that. You're looking at the aspects on the deeper, deeper, deeper levels that happen from childhood. I mean, your subconscious is programmed in the last trimester to the first 6 to 8 years of your life. That's where you're going into as to why you're not able to XYZ get to where you want to go, and what kind of patterns hold you back. So I think that you can still do them. I mean, I've been doing them in congruence. And I believe that they can be done, but one of them is truly future manifest, and the other one is looking at the past to figure out how you can heal your orientation around your association with money, with relationships, with outcomes, with people, with being a victim, whatever it is. It's looking at those, and that's good work. And it's exhausting, though. I mean, there's a little bit of a compromise probably on a little productivity level because it's emotional. And I will say, I mean, when it comes to that work, it's called growing pains for a reason. I don't believe that you can get out the other side of learning a deep, deep rooted pattern lesson without going through that alchemical process of burning the original down and out so that you can shine brighter. Like, you have to let it burn, and that burning hurts. Seeing it, it's like looking at it burns it. But you have to look at it, and it's not easy. And so every single time I've healed one of those, like, I have truly broken down. Like, I would say every time there's been, I would give it for sure about an hour of like uncontrollable convulsion like crying. It's like you don't know what's going on, but something is processing, and waves, and just like I would say there's always like associated with it. Sometimes I would say that you've got to give it, like, there's got to be this one magical hour where you lose your, what.
Yeah.
You don't know where it came from or what's going. You don't really, it's like hard to know why you're crying so hard to know why it hurts so bad, hard to know why your body isn't crying like normal. If you don't go through that little process, and it is little, it burns like no other, but it takes like that magical hour where you finally come to terms with something, and then you can come out the other side. Doesn't mean it's the only time you cry, but it definitely means that is an important part of the process. And so that is taxing, that is exhausting, but it's kind of like being sick. When you're sick, it's the worst, right? It's like you think, I'm going to die. I can't believe how horrible I feel. I'd do anything to feel better. Is this ever going to end? I can't believe this 24-hour fluid bug feels like 4 years. And then all of a sudden, like a week later, you're like, oh yeah, that's right. I was sick last week. That wasn't that big of a deal. I mean, it was just a day. Like, you can look back and go, oh my God, I'm out the other side, and everything. But in the moment, it feels so excruciating. But that's part of the process. And it's to achieve greatness. There has to be struggle. There has to be sacrifice. There has to be the energy is not free. It's just not like, and if you put good energy in, good things come out. And so you just have to be prepared for that process. It takes
That is
bravery.
so powerful, so true. And Brennan Manning was the one that said, I knew I was broken, but I continually tried to never be broken again. It's that place of brokenness that's a part of that process. Like you said, the process really can't happen unless we get in touch with our brokenness. We have to experience that. So I don't want to let this one thing that you said really pass by. And I guess this might have to be the last point. We could probably go on for another couple of hours, I'm quite sure, because this is just really awesome. Maybe you'll come back again one day. But you said this. You said having worth without being the strong one. I didn't want to let that one pass by.
Damn it.
He caught it.
Give us a little bit.
You really are good at all of this. Gosh, you caught that one raw statement. But that was true. I mean, that was so true. I remember I was on the phone with someone and I was crying, and there were people showing up for me in my life in really like meaningful, kind, loving ways. And I couldn't understand it. And the question was like, what is it that you can't understand? And I said, and again, I'm a quick processor. So like in that moment, I was like, I hadn't put a lot of thought to it, but I just went, what is it? And I think it's got to happen like that. That's why prompts, like journal prompts or whatever, the prompts are really powerful because you've never kind of asked certain questions to yourself before. But in that question, I was like, what is it? And I was like, I can't believe that someone could just show up for me when I'm not strong. Like I thought my role was to be the strong one. I thought my role was always to be the one that people could call and get advice or help from. And it ultimately ends up showing that sort of deeper layer, which is your own belief in your self-worth. Like to believe that I was worthy of love and worthy of someone sacrificing for me without doing anything. That is such a hard concept for me to wrap my head around. I feel like I have to do something to get worth, and we don't. Like, and what I feel like is true is just that your essence, everyone's essence, is beautiful, and that is the worth. Like you are exuding you. You don't even notice it because it's you. And this is why life is complicated, because we need other people to show us, which is why life is challenging, right? But it's actually simple because it's all just information. And it's information about us. And so, for me in that moment, it was like, oh my God, people are showing up for me when I'm not strong. It must mean I'm worth something.
Well, yeah, your intrinsic value, and that's what I meant when I introduced you, is that, you have all of this strength and intentionality, but you also have this beautiful vulnerability, and that comes from that part of you, you have a lot of vulnerability. It's beautiful.
Thank you.
Thanks for going in there with me. Appreciate that. So I have time for just, I think there's a couple of questions, and this is my friend, Lisa. So there you go. Can you see that, Danica?
Yeah, I got it. What's your favorite book? I mean, I'm looking, as I every now and again talked, I would look over because I have a little bookshelf, and I have not actually read a ton of books, although I can reference quite a few these days. So I aspire to having, like, I don't know if anyone ever saw my Alanis Morissette video interview, but she has a wall of books behind her. I'm like, that's what I want. But I would say some great books for me. I love The Alchemist. I think that's just such a great fundamental lesson. I think everybody takes from it it's like the book gives you, it gives you a lesson individual to you. I don't think everyone gets the same lesson from it. You get what you need from it. I think The Alchemist is a great book. I think Untethered Soul is a great book. I think, what other ones are over there? I mean, I loved Holographic Universe just because I love quantum physics. But I really think if I had to break it down to one, I think The Alchemist is just a really good, simple, great, powerful story that everyone should read. I also think that if we're looking on a more serious side, I think Mindset by Carol Dweck is a great one too, because it really breaks down your life into all the different categories of work, being an employee, being a boss, being a partner, being a parent, and showing how a fixed mindset versus growth mindset shows up in each of those facets of life. And I think it's just like a really good, simple, clear understanding to how to think.
Awesome. And one more.
Okay. All right. Dancer background. Athletes don't get caught up in performing. I mean, yes, it's in the process. I mean, I think it's still very important that you have goals far out there for what it is that you want to happen. But I think that, if I'm feeling into this, it's that, what if you think that it's in this situation, or in this instance, dancing, what if what if having that sort of practice puts you in the right city, gets you to meet the right people, gets you to learn the right lesson, that ends up teaching you what it is that you need, or giving you what you need to get you to where you're really meant to go. So to not overlook, because again, that for me, that's like the alchemist lesson, where it's like you want to go from here to here, but sometimes you got to go all the way around here to get to here, and that's still the quickest way. You had to learn all of those things to actually make that spot in time, that point in time, worth experiencing and being in, and being at peace with it. So so never overlook sort of your passions or where life leads you. But I think this is also really important to become aware of when you're really beating your head up against a wall, and when you should start to look at letting go of something. And allowing your life to pivot or transition into ways that are maybe more aligned and meant for you, that we can't quite see. It's like the analogy is like, you want to drive from New York to California. And of course, you're going to have to start driving through the night at times. And you can't see California, but you can see in front of your headlights. And so you can still get there by being able to see just a little way, but you know where you're going. And so, so I think that you don't always have to see the entire, and maybe, maybe the road leads you in Canada, and, you live in Vancouver in the end, who knows? But I think that that's just like an analogy for you don't have to always see the end to be able to keep moving forward.
Yeah. The lessons and the detours, right?
Yeah, sure. Exactly.
Well, I did have one more question, but we're going over time, so I'll probably have to save that for the next chapter.
Okay.
Because it's kind of a loaded question. It was really about like, what do you see in the next leg of your journey coming up, in the next days, weeks, months, and years. So you think you'd like to visit us and come back one time soon?
I'd love to. These are, to me, these are like my deep, meaningful relationships where I get energized. Like I'm literally going to get off this and be on a high, like an emotional, like charged, energetic up from this. So I would love to come back. Happy to come back. You're both such wonderful people. And I believe truly that we all give what we can. And for those of us who have a platform, or for those of us who are comfortable public speaking, or for those of us who are able to step into vulnerability, it is a duty or an honor, really, to be able to share that and help lead others. And we all have gifts, and it's just a matter of offering them. And I guess in a total woo-woo way, I believe that the world could exist purely on heart and love and giving what you can. And if everyone gave what they can, I don't think we wouldn't have to have even things as fundamental as money anymore, because we'd all give what we could.
Those were some of the best conversations you and I have had about like your neighbor.
Totally.
Dogs.
Oh yeah, we can get into that one next time for sure.
Yeah, learning love for sure. Yeah. Well, Frances, any final thoughts too? What's that, Danica?
I just said how to love your neighbor, but it starts with you.
Absolutely.
Yep. Well, and I am your neighbor yet again, so I think I'm going to come over there and give you a hug and give you some love, Danica.
I'm looking at the door right now. Come in.
For those of you that don't know, my husband and I just relocated back to Arizona to continue treatment for him, which is right where Danica lives. So, but thank you guys both for this hour. Bill, thank you for inviting me into this. I love you both deeply and sincerely, and this was really special for me too.
Love it. Love it. Love it. See you guys soon.
Thank you. Bye. Love you guys.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.